Welcome to second episode of Online Biology for Secondary Schools. This is part of our contribution of learning to support students who are currently at home due to COVID-19 school shutdown. In this biology lesson, we shall be studying organizations of life. At the end of this segment, you should be able to understand the levels of organization of life, be able to define a cell, understand the difference between plant-animal cell, and also have some review questions. Your biology teacher is Mrs. Comfort Anyanwu. Please have your writing materials to take notes as you watch this lesson. Should you have any questions or require further studies, please go to our website www.schoolset.com. I will now be handing over to your teacher, Mrs. Comfort Anyanwu. Have a happy viewing and stay safe.
In our last lesson, we looked at the characteristics of living things. Do you still remember, Mrs. Grant, what each of those words stands for to enable us to review our last lesson? Did you remember M, R, S, G, R, E, N? If you have answered, M is for movement, R for respiration, S is sensitivity, G for growth, R for reproduction, E for excretion, and N is for nutrition. I would say well done for remembering what we learned last lesson. We'll be looking at levels of organization of life. And we're going to break this topic into the following objectives. 1. We'll identify the levels of organization of life, define what a cell is, describe differences between plants and animals, and finally, we take some learning exercise where you attempt some questions. Identifying levels of organization. All living things are organized at different levels, from lowest to complex level. Lowest level has the simplest structures, and these simple structures join to form the complex ones. Look at this picture. Which image comes first in the organization of life? Can you organize life by just using these pictures? It starts from cell, tissue, organs, organ systems, and then we get organism. Again, we'll be looking at each of these in greater details, starting from cell. Now, what is cell? Cell is the first level of organization of living things. It is the smallest unit of every living organism. There are two types of cellular organization. The first one is unicellular, where the organism is made up of one cell. Animals in this group include amoeba and bacteria. The second level of cellular organization is called the multicellular. Organisms in this group are made up of many cells. For example, humans have about 50 trillion cells in their body. If we put all of them into a diagram, on the unicellular side, you can see organisms like Paramecium bacteria, amoeba, and Euglena, and these are things you need to know for your exams. While on the multicellular side, You have organisms including plants, animals, cats. They are made up of many cells. Let's look at the next level of life organization, the tissues. Tissues is a group of similar cells working together to perform a specific function. That word similar is very important. Tissue is the second level of life organization. Example of organism at this level is Hydra. The next level we're going to look at is the organs. Now, organs, they are a group of different tissues working together to perform a specific function. If you remember previously when I defined tissue, I told you to pay particular attention to the word similar. Now, once we get to organs, we are now using the word different tissues working together to perform a specific function. Organ is the third level of life organization. An example of organs, as you can see, include the heart and liver. For example, the heart, you can see there has so different types of tissues. Here is the muscle tissue. And here we have also the fat tissue. Now, different tissues making up the heart. And also on the leaves, as we can see later, the leaf has two different types of tissues. The xylem, we're going to see this later on, and phloem. O-E-M. These are tissues in the leaf as an organ. If we look at the next level, we come to the organ system. Again, we need different organs working together to perform a specific function for us to have an organ system. Is the fourth level. An example of organ systems include the circulatory system, water transport system. For example, if we look at this leaf, the xylem tissue we met before, if we draw a line going down, we will extend until we get to another part of the plant, which is the stem, and then we'll extend to the root. So you can see that there are so many organs involved. The root is an organ, the stem and the leaf, they are all different organs in plant, in water transport in plants. If you look at this circulatory system in animals, you can also see that there are so many organs involved. Here we have the heart, it's an organ. We have the lungs, two of them, another organ. And then we have all these blood vessels. And in fact, if we keep going up, all these link together with the brain and every other organ in your body. So an organ system consists of many organs working together to perform a specific function. And finally, when we now have all these different organ systems working together, that makes an organism. This is the most complex level of life organization. And this is where plants and animals come in. Looking at these organisms in these pictures, every single one of them has so many organ systems working together to keep them alive. These organ systems include circulatory system, respiratory system. We also have a skeletal muscular, that's for movement, reproductive system, and others. And this is why each of these organisms, they are very, very complex. This brings us to the end of looking at the levels of organizations of life. We're now going to look at each of those levels in close details, starting with cell. Animals and plants are made up of cells. Cells are the basic building blocks of life. Just as the bricks here, there are different cells in plants and animals. Cells are very small to be seen by the human eyes. A typical plant cell is between 0.05 micrometer, and while that of animal is 60 micrometer in size. Thinking about this, a micrometer is simply as tiny as a strand of human hair. Just one strand of human hair. That's how small a micrometer looks like. Because of how small these cells are, we need a microscope to look at them. For example, cheek cells from animal look exactly like this under the microscope. Plant cell, such as the onion cell, also looks as big as this under the microscopes. But without the microscope, we can hardly see them. Now we're looking at the differences between plant and animal cells. Plant and animal cells are made up of organelles. Organelles refer to different parts. Some of these parts are found in both plants and animal cells. However, plant cells have extra organelles that we can't find in animal cells. Let's take a look at the parts of an animal cell. Now, this is a complex animal cell in that it shows all the organelles you can see, starting from the cell membrane, the cytoplasm, endoplasmic reticulum, the nucleus, ribosomes, centrioles, mitochondria, Golgi bodies, and vacuole. However, we also have the simplified version of an animal cell, where we can just have the cell membrane, that's the cytoplasm, inside cytoplasm, and then the nucleus. We'll be looking at this in details very soon. We're going to look at what each of these organelles does for the animal cell. If we start with the cell membrane, the cell membrane, which is this outer layer, is specially permeable. Is that barrier that controls what goes in and out of the cell. If we look at the cytoplasm, which is inside cytoplasm, it's like a jelly-like material. For example, the closest I can explain to you, if you are conversant with ogi or akamo, that is how the cytoplasm looks like. This is where all the organelles are found, and this is where all the cellular activities take place. Another part we look at is the nucleus. The nucleus is the location of cells' DNA, the genetic materials, or the genes. They are found in the nucleus. And the nucleus controls all the activities that go on in the cell. The mitochondria, that is the site in the cell responsible for respiration, where energy is released. We've come across respiration before, so that's where energy is made for every cell. And finally, look at the ribosomes. The ribosomes are the site for protein synthesis. We have just looked at animal cells. Now let's look at the parts of a plant cell. This is a simplified version of a plant cell. Just as in animal cell, the plant cell also has a cell membrane, cytoplasm, the nucleus, as the animal cell. In addition, there are other organelles, such as the cell wall, the chloroplast, and then the vacuole. These are not present in animal cell. Now let's look at again what each of these parts does for the plant cell. Let's start with the cell wall. The cell wall is a rigid external coat that protects and supports a plant cell. Now, animals don't have a cell wall because we have our bones to give us support and structure. We've also covered the cell membrane, the cytoplasm, nucleus, mitochondria, and ribosome do exactly the same thing as we have described in animal cell. However, the chloroplast is the site for photosynthesis because it contains the green pigment chlorophyll, and that is what absorbs the sun's energy during photosynthesis. And finally, the vacuole. This vacuole is a cavity filled with stores water and nutrients. It contains the cell sap, and this supports the cell and makes them turgid. We've just looked at plant and animal cells separately. Now let's look at what they have in common together. The animal cells can see all the organelles, the same thing as the plant cells. So in exam, they will be asking you, what are those things that plant cells have that animal cells do not have? And possibly, what are the functions? And all that we have already discussed. A quick recap on plant and animal cells. Where do we find all these organelles? The ribosomes. We know they are found in both plant and animal cells. Vacuole, where do you think it goes to? If you said animal cell, that would be correct. Mitochondria, They are both plant and animal cells. Chloroplast, the green pigment, where do we find it? Is in plant cells. Cytoplasm, in both. Cell wall is for plant. Cell membrane is for both. And nucleus is found in both plant and animal cells. That brings us to an end of our discussion on plant and animal cells. We're going to look at some learning exercises to conclude our today's lesson. Question number 1 will be: make a labeled diagram of a typical plant cell to show its essential features. If you can draw this complex one, that will be excellent. However, you can as well draw the simple one I've shown you before. Question 2. Describe the basic differences in plant and animal cell. If you can remember, chloroplast, vacuole, and cell wall, these are the 3 parts that you do not have in animal cell. Let's go back to where we started our lessons today. We have identified all the levels of organization of life. We have defined what a cell is. We have also described differences between plants and animals, and we have done some learning exercises. In our next lesson, we'll be looking at classification of living things. Until I come your way next time, thanks for watching. See you next time, and goodbye.